The last few quarters for Netflix have been, well, disappointing. At least, that's the nice way of putting it. It's been a complete trash fire if you look at it more honestly, and they're having some difficulty with their stock. They're not the only streaming service that's having that kind of difficulty. The ones associated with studios are having a similar difficulty, and I have a feeling that Disney and Paramount and some others are not in for a great quarterly report. Let's just put it that way. You have massive stories coming out about people running away from Netflix in droves, but it gives you a bigger picture of a bigger market that has the same problem. There's too much streaming and not enough customers to pay for it. So let's look at the solution Netflix is proposing and why that obviously is going to be met with a lot of resistance. Here we go. You've seen a lot of headlines like this one. Hedge fund manager Bill Ackman sells entire Netflix stake, taking a $400 million loss. Okay, honestly, that one's pretty unique, but he outlines his concerns with the platform and basically says we can't predict what this company is going to do performance-wise. The models don't exist any longer that work, and we need to take it slower when we look at companies like this. I wished he would have done that sooner, at least for the people that were involved in his fund. But to be honest with you, he's not wrong. A lot of things get said by a lot of different studio heads when it comes to their streaming services. Disney's still trying to tell you that they're going to have 200 million subscribers somehow by the end of 2024. I'm not sure that's going to happen. I'm not even sure they can maintain the subscribers that they have for another year and a half with the subpar content that they've been providing lately, at least when you look at the Marvel and the Star Wars stuff and any of the other content that they're providing. Not to mention the fact that they've seemed to have gone to war outside of their streaming service with the public in general, and at least, the interests of a large percentage of the public in general. But we'll set that aside. Back to Netflix, you have more problems because people realize, I guess, that the cat's out of the bag. It's a shell game. The stock continues to drop, as you can see here, from just a couple of days ago to what was the close of business yesterday. And although they had a slight uptick, they still fell almost 10%, only to rise another 2 or 3% in after-hours trading. And I'll be keeping an eye on this to try to keep this video more current. But to be honest with you, tech across the board has been getting pummeled, and Google took a huge hit yesterday, on top of Disney continuing to slide. Again, investors are becoming wise to being sold the idea that subscribers somehow translate into long-term success, when that doesn't seem to be all that truthful, at least not now. Of course, we also have this big problem that's happening across the entire globe where people are having to make decisions about what's important. UK streaming subscriptions shrink as households look to cut costs. This is one of many stories, and this one goes all the way back to April 19th, talking consistently about the fact that they're dropping these services because they just don't see the value in them over, eating, petrol, whatnot. And there isn't a lot there. I mean, the Disney quarterly churn essentially tripled to 12% just in the last quarter. I wonder what May 11th is going to look like. Stay tuned for that one, everyone. So with all those things being a factor, how is Netflix going to return to some form of believable profitability, at least for the future? And so we arrive at Netflix's advertising dilemma. See, they're proposing putting ads on their platform. Well, at least one of the tiers. You probably will end up with 3 or 4 tiers, and one of them will be free of ads, but you'll have to pay a premium price. Not that the price hasn't gone up consistently, and most recently scared a lot of people away. and they're going to lose another 2 million more in the next quarter at least. Oof, not good. So what would that look like? Well, the lower couple of tiers would probably get ads. But how do you sell ads when you lack transparency? Well, here's the article to explain it. Netflix advertising dilemma: will partners get any more transparency? I'm going to reach right out now and say probably not much. Not having commercials during its programming has been a hallmark of Netflix's corporate image as a disruptive force in TV. Even as the company moved ever closer to the broadcasting ideal of offering some for everyone, or something for everyone, it resisted or even scoffed at the idea of bringing in ads. But after the release of the rough quarterly earnings report on April 19, in which Netflix had its first net loss in subscribers in more than a decade, co-CEO Reed Hastings said that the streamer would launch a less expensive ad-supported subscription tier in the next couple of years. I imagine it'll come sooner than that. They're going to run into some real problems soon. And basically, it'll put them in a position where they're playing catch-up. There are a lot of people who are excited about this in the industry, and the folks that, sell you ads are excited about it as well. But there has to be some data out there, or else it just doesn't work. With advertising comes the need to let the advertisers know whether they're getting their money's worth, which means you have to share data. Something that the streaming world as a whole, and Netflix specifically, hasn't been all that excited on doing. And in the ad world, one of the requirements is some level of transparency. Third-party auditing is required, and obviously some kind of reporting methodology. Advertisers want some proof points, says Jim Lombard, CEO of Connected TV, an ad marketplace for television advertising. Netflix has been slow to reveal that stuff, he continued. No kidding. None of them want to talk about it because you would be disappointed at really how few views their new content is getting. In fact, there were stories upon stories not that many months ago talking about how dismal the performance has been for the Netflix original series as of late, anyway. A lot of people are only keyed in on a handful of them, and the rest is largely garbage, but it's an opinion statement. I'll keep going with this. Publicly available viewing data for streaming programming remains scant, even as the most big media companies such as Disney, Warner Bros. Discovery, NBC Universal, and Paramount Global are among all of those, have incorporated ads into their platform. I don't know how, but they have. Hulu, HBO Max, and Discovery Plus, Peacock, and Paramount are obviously the ones they're referring to here. These companies all have long-standing relationships with the ad business thanks to their collective linear outlets, in other words, television, and thus are presumably sharing their ratings for streaming with buyers, even as they keep virtually all the data away from public consumption. Wondering how long it is till we start to get some of that out in the wild. We'll have to see. It's likely Netflix would follow a similar model, continuing its broad but not very deep public reporting, but keeping the more granular numbers for partners' eyes only. Hastings said last week that the company likely would outsource the ad tech aspects of the business rather than building its own system, despite the reams of data it already has on its users. By the way, if you don't think that data is available for sale to others, oh, you're mistaken. That stuff moves around as fast as pretty much everything else. In fact, the next opinion piece I bring up will talk a little bit about that. But Netflix has also taken a few small steps towards acknowledging third-party data. When Nielsen released its first platform rankings 10 months ago, showing that the streaming world had overtaken linear television, or broadcast TV, they earned praise from Netflix CEO, who said, Nielsen is a good place to reference for scorekeeping how streaming is changing the US television landscape. Interesting. Of course, we've been talking about Nielsen's numbers, Roku, Samba TV, and others, and aggregating them gives us a pretty decent picture of what things look like, but in no way is it perfectly accurate. It doesn't account for phone views, and it doesn't account for other options, although most people are now using streaming boxes on their television. So as far as the industry is concerned, at least industry advertisers, we have an opinion piece from Tom Goodwin, who seems to know a little bit about the industry, and it reads, Netflix and the biggest opportunity ever in advertising. This was penned on April 25th, just a few days ago, so it's worth noting. As Netflix finally prepares to allow ads, everyone's talking about what they could do with the mountains of first-party data. But forget that, says, of course, the writer of this, Tom Goodwin, who instead argues that this could be the catalyst for a much bigger rethink of how TV and digital advertising works. And honestly, he's not wrong, but it's kind of concerning. In what's been the most inevitable thing in media, Netflix admitted last week that it may have to succumb to the gravitational pull of advertising money. Predictably, we saw lots of people outside ad tech decry, this will ruin my Netflix. Of course it will, and I'm one of those. And those in ad tech get excited about all the first-party data and reaching a tranche of hard-to-reach people. The truth is a little more boring and a little less dramatic. It's likely Netflix will offer several tiers, as I mentioned before. The terabytes of first-party data Netflix has may not be especially interesting. Knowing that you watched 3 episodes of Ozark before you tapped out, or 23 minutes into Love Blind, what browser you use isn't necessarily of massive interest, although there are some tech firms that would like to know that, in what has typically been a context for reach and scale and not precision. At least that's how they analyze this data now. What is interesting is the questions it raises about how to monetize such an audience in the digital age. Well, he talks a little bit about advertising and how it had been used previously, but this would be targeted advertising, he suggests. And he actually asked the right questions during the course of this article, so it's worth looking for on a site called The Drum, by the way. So the real promise of Netflix, according to the author here, as an ad platform is that it may get our industry to finally challenge assumptions. We may see the scale and potential of a platform and audience and consumption context and decide to invent new forms of advertising, which honestly we've been talking about for a long time, granularly advertising to a specific audience. This is something that's been speculated about for, 7 years maybe, since we first started to see some streaming services that went ad-based, like Pluto and things like that. And believe me, they're already doing it. They selectively drive ads to select clients who seem more likely to favor whatever it is that's being presented. So it's not anything super new, but it is something that definitely would work. Can't wait to see what they try to sell me. I'll buy anything. We may serve as sequential units that build over time. That makes a lot of sense, breaking them up into 5 or 10 second segments. Seems like a smart way to go about it. We may finally see frequency capping. That would also be interesting. We could see units placed in real time responding delicately to the weather or even news events. Would also make sense to avoid those sticky situations that they ran into in Mad Men, if you ever watched that television series, where they were talking about communism and a communist agitator, and then they had a ad for a washing machine on a television show that was talking great guns about the agitator that helped get your laundry clean. You can see why that would bother an advertiser anyway. We could place ads not by dodgy audience data, but by viewing context. So this particular type of person watches this particular type of show. You could give even more granular than just those basic demographics. But I have a feeling that they're just going to start there first. So as he suggests, what should an advert feel like in Bridgerton? Well, it would be different than something versus a show like Too Hot to Handle. So I think you're going to start seeing more and more of this, but I don't really, at the end of the day, feel like it's going to solve Netflix's problem. It might help other streaming services, but they're already doing it. At least Disney's diving right into it. Obviously, HBO Max / Warner Brothers Discovery, whatever that thing ends up being when it's ultimately finished. But I think that you're going to start seeing more and more of that targeted advertising. So it's not really, I don't think, going to help Netflix too terribly much, despite the fact that they have the biggest head start, being the granddaddy of them all, in, well, at least as far as purely streaming goes. And maybe it'll work, maybe it'll deliver the goods for Netflix, but I think people are going to start changing what they consume. And to be honest with you, there's some other things they need to consider. People are returning to theaters. That's where the experience is, and streaming services have been cutting their noses off to spite their face. One of the old sources of programming for Netflix used to be the same studios that are now competing with them as streamers, and that's not good. But to sum it all up, when it comes to that experience, theater owners chief warns Hollywood day-and-date releases are dead as a serious business model. And I couldn't agree more. But we'll see what happens. Netflix doesn't really compete in the theatrical release market, but they try. And we'll see what ultimately this leads to for Netflix as far as, a growth in revenue. I know it's not going to lead to more subscribers, and I think you're actually going to start to see Netflix have contraction, and I think other streaming services will suffer as well. Anyway, what do you think? Be sure to use the comment section down below to let me know, because I would appreciate that conversation. This video was a little bit long, so I'll spare you a long diatribe on the way out. Support independent creators, please. I would truly appreciate that. Be sure to use the engagement tools that are provided to you by the service. And with all that being said, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, wash your hands, of course, because it's good hygiene. And until next time, bye.
Hey there, one last quick note before I let you go, and before we make it to the end of this video. I, CultureCasino, have a brand new Teespring store. That's right, you can now go to Teespring, look up CultureCasino, or use the link in the video below, and pick out some handsome and beautiful CultureCasino merchandise with many different designs and styles and colors, many different items. I was actually surprised at all of the things that you could create, and I have some more designs and items on the way here shortly. But, if you want to support the channel in that way, there is some merch. Otherwise, here comes the ending. Thanks for visiting today. Be sure you're subscribed and hit that for alerts.
Yay!
Of course, like and share all of the videos that you can, as it helps with the algorithm. Have a great day.